Yo, what is up guys, Bob87 King here, back again with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing the review of Disventure Camp Season 1, and similar to what I did for Season 2, I will be separating them into different categories and giving them a rating out of 10, and then at the end, we'll see what the rating truly is. Overall thoughts on the season though, I do really enjoy this season, but I can't say I like it better than Season 2. While this season does have better gameplay, in my opinion, slightly better character dynamics, I just feel like the weak points really drag this season down, and also the finale and the last few episodes were not the greatest as well. However, what really carries this season, in my opinion, is the gameplay, and also how hard this cast really does play, and how largely villainous this cast is, to where I always wanted a more villainous cast, or at least a cast that was willing to play the game, because in my opinion that makes for more entertaining drama. And not to mention a cast that was mainly full of people with like very sad backstories, because in my opinion casting people who mostly have great lives outside of the show kind of make for just boring TV because they're not going to play as hard, Bowie Jane. But you know, I just felt like this cast came here to play, and I feel like everyone did do a great job, also as characters as well. I feel like a lot of these characters are great people, and I would love to see them back on an All-Star season, or just a random season, just because of how great they were. I feel like a lot of these characters do have potential for another season, which is something that I can't really say for some Disventure Camp Season 2 characters. But yeah, we'll go through it, talking about the host, the characters, the gameplay, and also the relationship. So yeah, let's just get started with the host. Obviously, the hosts are Derek and Trevor, these two people who really wanted to start a reality TV show, which really makes you wonder, why were they so bad at hosting? Genuinely speaking here, these two have terrible charisma with the contestants. They have terrible chemistry with the contestants. They also make terrible TV in general, to where honestly the storyline is just very basic, and not to mention also kind of lacking in story-wise, to where you don't really know what's even going on until like the kind of very end, and even then it's just not that interesting because Derek is kind of just a ripoff of Chris, but Chris in the later season, not Chris in like Island Action or debatably even World Tour, even though I don't find him interesting in World Tour. Derek was just more so a Chris clone, and that was just terrible to watch. I do think Trevor could have been better having this more skittish host, but then it's like, I don't know, he just falls flat in general. Not to mention the whole Jensen plotline, I might as well include him too. That also drags it down a bit, to where Jensen could have been this interesting character, but once again, the show barely highlights him in the entire show. To where the finale just felt very cartoony because of the way it ended, with all of them going to jail and then Jensen driving over a cliff, which, yeah, that's just so weird. To me, Derek and Trevor are definitely the two weakest parts of the season overall, because they have no really redeeming traits to them. So yeah, Derek and Trevor, they both suck. They score a 2 out of 10. Let's just talk about the cast now, which honestly this cast is pretty fantastic. I mean, there's Gret, someone who I really do love as a villain of the show. She's someone who really is kind of essentially this kind of Heather or Jose type character too, where they have a very sad background, but that's kind of what makes them who they are. Maybe not Jose, she doesn't really have a sad background, but at least Gret is always being overshadowed by her brother and feels like she needs to win the show just to prove herself to her family, which is a pretty nice story, and they do wrap out her journey pretty nicely. I also did like how antagonistic she was with Gabby, who is another great character. I mean, she's completely insane, but she's also insanely fun to watch. Her idling out Dan and pretty much being like, "That's what you get for voting on my bestie," was very funny. I had to stop to laugh at that, not gonna lie. There's obviously Alec, my favorite character of the season, the best player of the season. And honestly, I did really just enjoy Alec feeling like this older version of Noah and a more mature Noah. And in my opinion, I do like the fact that he was married and he had this very tragic backstory. There's a lot of these characters that do have tragic backstories, similar to Ellie. You could debate Miriam and also Jake, to where Jake's boyfriend ends up cheating on him in the past, which does lead into a lot of the drama between him and Tom. And I feel like Jake was also a character too. While I wasn't that high on during the season, I feel like I leave the season, which was a pretty high appreciation of Jake's character, not gonna lie. And obviously there's Miriam, the winner of the show, which I feel like Miriam is also a very great character, has a great story throughout the entire season. And while I never predicted her to win the season, I feel like later on, I kind of did. But Miriam's just a very great character, someone who came there to play hard, and she really did. And not to mention, she was also just pretty funny in general, kind of being the glue that held Tom and Jake together, which I found very interesting. There's obviously characters that I didn't really care about, like Dan, who I wouldn't say Dan's a bad character. I just mainly found him very annoying. I don't know what it was, but he kind of just gave me Cody vibes. Not in the sense that he was Cody, because they really aren't the same. But it's like he voted out Gabby, which, And then he also just talked like he was a better player than he actually was, which greatly annoys me if you know my opinions about Big Brother Canada. But yeah, honestly, there's that. Fiore is another fantastic character. Really does dominate most of the screen time of the season. And to be honest, I feel like the season truly depends on how much you like Fiore low-key. To where Fiore's definitely the big character. You could debate like she has the most plot armor of the season. To where if Fiore was a very unlikable character, I feel like this season would definitely go down. But Fiore's just so great as a villain. To where it really does. Like the entire heel turn of her is trying to be like this nice person to get on everyone's good side, and then really just dismantle every single relationship was just so interesting and fascinating to watch. There's obviously Ellie, another fantastic character. There's Ashley and Will, two people who I felt like had massive potential. More so Ashley, but I feel like Will also could have had potential as well. I felt like they could have been really cute together, but I'll save that for the relationship portion of the video. There's Nick, a pre-merge boot who was incredible. I really did like a lot of Nick's British antics. I don't know why, but British people are just pretty funny to me, so there's that. Also, there's Lil, someone who just reminded me of Lil from Survivor Pearl Islands. And that was pretty cool to watch, honestly. Mainly just because I just finished watching Pearl Islands, so that was pretty cool. And then obviously Drew, the character that I played. And while I didn't get any lines, which kind of did suck, but it was pretty fun voicing Drew, and I had a lot of fun. Overall, these characters were insanely fun, and honestly, they all just had great dynamics. So to be honest, the characters get a 9 out of 10. Moving on to the gameplay of the season, which in my opinion was very, very strong. We obviously had the Will, Ashley, Nick, and Lil alliance, which I did found very interesting at the beginning, mainly just because they're all very different people. And I felt like seeing all these people work together was very interesting to watch until Fiore is able to go in and then completely destroy the alliance by getting everyone to vote on Will, which I think was a very big move on Fiore's part. And then seeing how Fiore was able to work Nick out and then able to blindside Nick in a 3-2-1 vote, which I also found very interesting to watch. Seeing Alec and Fiore, two of the better players and definitely two of the best, debatably best players of Disventure camp of all time, completely run circles around that team was just so fascinating to watch. And then seeing how Alec was able to flip on Ellie, who Ellie assumed was Alec's closest ally or whatever. And then seeing her come back, and then seeing how Gabby and Ellie like completely trusted Alec, Fiore, and Gret to all vote together, but then completely blindside Gabby. It was just so fun to watch. And while it wasn't the best move of all time, I just felt like it was so entertaining that it made it okay at least. I mean, similar thing with the Jake and Tom vote, obviously, to where Jake's development kind of gets ruined just for this big move, which obviously I was happy about because I was rooting for Alec and Fiore, but definitely story-wise wasn't the best, but what are you going to do there? We obviously have Gabby playing the idol for Ellie and then completely blindsiding Dan and kind of getting like payback for him voting her out rounds earlier. Obviously the Drew blindside, the Nick blindside, which I just mentioned. Even the boring votes are still pretty interesting in my opinion. I completely forgot to mention the Gret vote, which was kind of boring, but then again, pretty fun to watch, I guess. And not to mention the Alec blindside, which I did kind of hate, but then again, it's like, it's kind of interesting as well to look at it. In my opinion, if I was Fury, I still wouldn't vote out Alec. I would at least try to get him to third, but, you know, seeing how she views the game was pretty interesting, I guess, to an extent. We obviously have Miriam completely controlling her team at one point, completely dominating to get out Gret, but then obviously Gret comes back, and yeah. Seeing, honestly, this cast came here to play, and I really did enjoy that, and while obviously some people didn't play well, at least they played hard, so yeah, the gameplay gets a 10 out of 10. Moving forward to the relationships and the couples, which obviously there are only 2 couples and also really just one main dynamic throughout the season, which I did debate if I should include Alec and Fiore, because they aren't really a couple, like they don't date each other, but they are a very present duo throughout the entire show, which obviously their father-daughter dynamic was insanely fun to watch. Their villainous tirade for all the season. The fact that they pretty much dominate most of the season together, which I honestly did enjoy them a lot. They're my two favorite characters from the season personally. To where, yeah, I would love to see them come back for All Stars, which both of them are, canon to be there, so that's great. But we can talk about the two other couples, which I did find them to be a bit weaker. I feel like Ellie and Gabby got very little development, and supposedly, I don't know if in Adventure Camp, because I kind of just stopped watching after the first episode, I don't know if they really get together in Adventure Camp, but on Disventure Camp Season 1, they definitely don't get enough moments together, despite them being actually pretty cute together. And as for Jake and Tom, they are definitely an interesting couple. Obviously, they don't end up together, which I personally do like. I do like the fact that like they are very messy. Like at the time, I found them relatively boring, but I feel like in retrospect, they are pretty interesting to watch. They just aren't really the best characters for me personally. They don't offer what I really like as characters, which is like gameplay and also just be insanely funny, but they just didn't have that, so I wasn't really that invested, but they're still okay. Overall, the couples were just good enough to where the couples get a 6 out of 10. Now moving on to the winner, which is Miriam, obviously, which I do find Miriam's story to be relatively interesting on the season, but at points, especially earlier on in the season, she just felt mainly as a background character, to where the more interesting characters like Alec, Fiore, Ashley, Lil, Jake and Tom even, and also Gret, Gabby, like I feel like those characters were definitely the main focus of the early portion of the season, to where at one point I had her second last in my winner prediction video, which isn't a great sign for her as a character, to be honest. I found her pretty one note at the beginning because she was just this old Karen grandma, not really Karen, but at least like this just person who likes to bicker with people, and it's like, why are you even here then? But she really does turn around when she leads the Gret side and starts actually playing the game, which I found interesting. Her relationship with Jake was also great to watch because I feel like that made Jake a lot more redeeming in my opinion, to where, yeah, Miriam was just pretty great also. She had a lot of funny moments in her confessionals, and her just being like this old person who has experienced a lot made her a very sympathetic character and overall a great winner for the show, especially if you aren't a fan of like these more villainous characters. Don't get me wrong, Miriam still obviously is a gamer, and like obviously gamers are viewed as more villainous people, but I feel like Miriam's just one of those people that even if she's like trying to outplay people, it always comes off as like Miriam's a good person in all of this. And yeah, overall, she was just a very satisfying character to watch, especially during the halfway point of the season, to where she is this more redeemable kind of underdog in a sense. And once Ellie and Fiore started to become less interesting characters and Fiore just became kind of weird in the last two episodes, Miriam was more than deserving of the winner, and she definitely played the best game of the season. And at least my opinion, she played the best game, debatably so. Miriam's a pretty solid character. I can't wait for her to be on All Stars, and Miriam gets a solid 7 out of 10. So once you combine all the scores, Disventure Camp Season 1 gets a 6.8 out of 10, which honestly sounds a bit low, but in retrospect, with a lot of the lows I have with this season, with the pacing near the end feeling a bit weird, with a lot of the character developments, but then kind of having to derail them just to make like the gameplay and the story more interesting to keep people like Alec and Fiore in the game, and the abundance of like pretty much non-elimination rounds, or at least like bringing people back into the game, which I found kind of repetitive to just keep the more interesting people. And while they do still make interesting TV, it does kind of like, I don't know, something just felt missing about overall the season. I also just don't care for Derek and Trevor throughout the season, and their screen time whenever they're on the show was just so weird, to where they can't really carry out a scene, to where at least with seasons like Next Generation or Total Drama, if they were to skip to like Cassandra or Chris and Chef, I feel like I would get like pretty fun moments from those scenes. But with Derek and Trevor, they just sucked every single like joy out of me. I also didn't really care for the Jake and Tom stuff at the beginning, to where they were pretty boring. And overall, I leave the season with just feeling like there's a lot better they could have done with it, because this cast is very strong. The gameplay was also very fun to watch. I just feel like there's certain elements that really do drag the season down, and that's why it is at a 6.8 out of 10. But yeah, that's the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and yeah, peace out.